Well, thank you guys for joining the first podcast episode for the Gem State Housing Alliance. Very excited to talk with you about how you started, essentially was Idaho's first pro-housing advocacy coalition that helped pass the modern zoning code here in Boise and bring our zoning code into the times. I just want to talk with each of you about how you started this group, why others should do the same, and how they do the same as well, because we need more pro-housing coalitions in Idaho, obviously. Every other city in Idaho, their zoning code is way stuck back, I think, in 1970. Mostly. We do have some cities in Idaho now that have updated their codes to allow for ADUs and smaller lot sizes and things like that, but I think we still need a lot of updates all across Idaho. And as you know, we need people pushing for that in their cities. So hopefully you guys can inspire the folks listening today how to do that. So I'm Allie. You guys all know me. And I'm leading the Gem State Housing Alliance, and we're, partnering with Neighbors for Boise to continue your work. But if you guys could each just introduce yourself, and I think a quick tidbit on how you got involved in Neighbors for Boise initially, and then we'll kind of go from there.
I'll start off. My name is Patrick, and I'm a pharmacist by trade, and I spend far too much time online. And what brought me to the housing advocacy space was seeing the success of similar movements elsewhere. Something that's interesting about housing, and zoning reforms in particular, is that it's not exclusively or even primarily like a resource question. We need more tax dollars, we need more stuff. But it's really about just deciding to do things differently. And it's a problem or an opportunity where people winning the argument in other cities, probably mostly initially in California, but also in a variety of places, smart, engaged local people are able to make the case, change minds, and change policy. And that seems like something worth working on.
My name's Joe. I've known Patrick for probably 8 years, and I love how he introduces himself always, which is, I am very online. That is such a great way to introduce yourself. But I got started with Neighbors for Boise, which actually initiated as a group called Afford Boise, which we can talk about in a minute. But I moved to Boise in 2003 and really started to see some of the same debates happening here that happened in Northern California where I grew up. And it kind of felt like deja vu in terms of the things people were talking about and what was happening, and the critiques about, building more housing here. It was like I was reading the Sacramento Bee from the 1990s. And so I saw what happened in Northern California, and specifically Sacramento, where I'm from, then, and really wanted to get involved because I think there's an opportunity here to prevent some of that damage that occurred there from happening here. So that's how I got involved.
Yeah, I'm Alexandra. I moved to Boise in 2014 and kind of came to housing through a couple of breadcrumbs professionally that led me to get interested in planning. So when I moved to Boise, I was really looking at doing a master's in planning. That ended up not working out, but I ended up just getting involved, and housing seemed like the kind of key to unlock a lot of different things that I was thinking about the built environment and how our communities could be better. And then kind of found these guys online is how we got connected originally, and started talking from there. Yeah.
Nice. Awesome. I know online is where it's at, where a lot of these conversations start and then continue. So you guys all know, my heart's really in this work too. I'm from this area, so I grew up in Middleton, which used to be farm fields, and now my former childhood home is surrounded by 1 acre lots, giant 1 acre lots with no infrastructure around them. Schools can't accommodate them. So my hometown has really been affected by urban sprawl and lack of, our ability to build in instead of out. Seen it, eat up farmlands and affect, my friends and neighbors growing up. And you guys know too, I've also worked in homelessness and serving folks that can't afford housing. So my heart's really there too. Just our inability to build, affects housing costs, number one. And we have so many Idahoans now that are living paycheck to paycheck, can't afford their rent. They can't get out of a rental because there's nowhere for them to go to live. They can't afford a starter home because there are no starter homes. Every home that we have in Idaho, now starts at way above where people can buy in. So, that's where my heart's coming from in this movement. But and starting Gem State Housing Alliance, I'm really excited. You two are on the board, which is great. I hope you'll be involved too in different ways, but eager to learn from you guys on how to, do the coalition building side of things, because every city in Idaho needs something like this. So from the start, who had the idea initially to just come up with this Facebook group, and how did you come up with this idea? And then I think the first step is always the hardest, right? So how did you get from point A to B to having this group?
So in 2018, I was working out of Trailhead. I was working remotely, and Trailhead was sort of where I was working from. It's kind of a shared office space. Two people who were also at Trailhead at that time were Don Day and Jeff Reynolds. And Don Day had just started Boise Dev on his own, so its own sort of local news service centered on development. And Jeff Reynolds ran the Reynolds and Myers marketing company. And so the three of us and a couple of Jeff's employees were in there, and we were always talking about this stuff because Don was publishing all the information on his website about the new developments that were coming up in apartment projects and townhouses. And as I mentioned earlier, I would see sort of the same debates happening around those that I saw growing up in Sacramento. And so we were talking about with Don, and Jeff was sort of my like mind, which is like, yeah, that's great. We need some more apartments. We need some more houses. We should totally build that. And then the comments you would see on the Boise Dev Facebook page were quite the opposite of that. No, we don't want these homes. It'll be too much traffic, too much noise. I like my neighborhood exactly how it is. I don't want it to change. People should stop moving here. And so we would talk about that, the three of us. And so when Jeff and I were talking, I was kind of thinking, there's probably other people out there besides myself and Jeff and Travis Franklin, who is one of his employees, who are mostly like, yeah, we should get this stuff. We need more housing here because prices are increasing. And this was pre-COVID, so prices had yet to really take off. They were just sort of increasing a lot and not a lot at that point. And so I thought, well, I'll just start a Facebook group, and then those people who are interested in this stuff and want to advocate for the other side of what seems like the dominant discourse, which is no, can get together, and we can post stuff and we can comment, and maybe we can organize people showing up at Boise City Hall to comment on proposed developments, and we can organize. So you said the first step was the hardest, but actually the first step was kind of the easiest, because it was just getting on Facebook and creating a group and then inviting some people that I had sort of gotten to know from Twitter or Facebook, like Patrick and Alexandra, to come to the group. And that's sort of how we got organized, was around that Afford Boise Facebook group. And then we started having monthly meetups where we go to a brewery, and there was no agenda. There might be like 15 people that would show up, and we'd have some beers and talk about the latest proposals and what was happening, and maybe we should show up and testify for these things. And it kind of got started from there.
How did you guys 15 people is actually, I've organized a lot of events growing, through my professional career. 15 people is pretty good turnout nowadays. I don't know if it's like post-COVID, nobody wants to go to events anymore, but just curious, so you connected with people from your networks that you were already engaged with, but how did you get people to come out to this? What were your talking points and getting people to come to this event? Another thing I've heard too is with events, if you don't have a specific focus, sometimes people don't want to go, but it sounds like you guys were just like, let's talk about housing, come on out. So how did you get people to engage in that?
I just put it on the Facebook group.
Yeah,
I just said that we're going to meet at...
no special sauce.
No, there really wasn't.
Okay.
We're going to meet at Lost Grove Brewery, and it's, Wednesday at 5:30. And, you should come down and we should hang out. And people did. It seemed like there was an untapped need for people of like mind around this issue. to come in and get together, because the dominant discourse at the time, like I said, was no.
Mm-hmm.
And there, I think the Facebook group brought people together who were more inclined to say yes.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt to me at that time like we were in the minority, and being around people that thought similarly to you, it made me feel like, oh, maybe we're not as much in the minority as I thought, or at least there is a substantial minority here. So it was kind of empowering to feel like that I wasn't just on an island.
And maybe part of it is your group's kind of filling the void, because something I've heard from other communities that have pro-housing groups is basically the NIMBYs have been loud for a very long time. The NIMBYs are the one, folks not in my backyard, for those of you at home, coming out to every P&Z hearing, every city council meeting. It's, those meetings are usually held at a time when folks who are working can't attend, they're home with their families. So typically the way we set up those meetings is kind of meant to engage folks that are more against housing, as opposed to, I think, just like regular working families that or young people or older folks that are more affected by high housing costs. So what I've heard too is, like, in the past, we just haven't had a place for pro-housing folks to go. So maybe, like you were saying, you knew these people were out there. They just didn't have kind of an outlet or a place to go. And so they were pretty excited to finally have somewhere to land and feel at home, and like their voice was part of this broader community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's totally, I was just going to say that, like, it almost felt like very exciting to have an opportunity to meet other people with the same viewpoint, because when you're seeing all of the comments that are like, no, we don't want this, we don't want, and I think coming from somebody who was living in apartments at that time, it felt like, we don't want you in our community. And it's like, these are people that were like, no, we do want you in our community. We want you to be part of this growth. We want you to be part of making Boise better. And like, so going to the event was not only finding like community in the sense of somebody who understands the challenge that we have in front of us as far as housing, but also somebody who wants other like-minded people to be part of the solution and wants to find connection and friendship. And like, it was more than just a political event. It was like, let's build community here. So
cool. Patrick, I know you were deep on the interwebs and the pro-housing movement at that time too. So why did you want to plug into this local group more?
Networking with other people that wanted to get to work. I always viewed it in an outcome-oriented fashion. We had the rumblings from the beginning around, we're probably going to have a new zoning code eventually, and let's orient our work and my work around making that, one, successful, and two, as good as it can be. I've seen meetups like this be successful elsewhere for group building and advocacy. Getting people to come testify at these hearings that you guys were just referring to is one easy win, and helped with engagement and help people find literally their voice in this issue. And plus, it's kind of fun to show up at a hearing and you'll hear people say it's too tall, what have you, and then you raise your hand and you say, I would like it to be taller, and then people gasp in the room, and it's all great fun. I got a hate letter once in the mail, actually. Whoa. From one of these hearings, but it's really changes the tone of the debate in those rooms to have voices on both sides rather than just one side pushing in a single direction.
Mm-hmm. I've heard it in some places they call it with the YIMBY Action Group, they do a lot of this stuff all over the country. They call it constituent building. These happy hour, it's literally happy hour. You can get grants for happy hours actually if you call it constituent building. So it's a great way to kind of bring people together and get them organized. So I guess my question though is next question is, how did you guys go from kind of this more general group of pro-housing people to more specific policy asks of the city? I know it's now quite a formal group, Neighbors for Boise. It's got a C4, it's got a website, it's got some funding behind it. So how did you guys go from, what was the next step to get it more focused around a specific policy ask? Because something I've read too is like, if you keep a group going, in this more general sense, it's not maybe going to be as lasting as a group with a specific policy agenda that where people can really feel like they're getting together is leading to some policy change and which is where you guys landed eventually. So what was kind of the next step from there to get things a little more formalized?
I'll take this one. Networking with influential local leaders, some in government, many outside of government, some in developer side, some in other advocacy groups that have similar interests. Jesse Tree would be one of them. And also within the local political establishment, to where we were eventually able to raise some funds to get good advice from Melanie Falwell was really essential in helping us with branding. You might ask eventually how the name came about. It'll come about with her help on that. Byron Falwell, her spouse, also was a good leader in how we can formalize some of this activity. And we put together a board, again, really kind of with the guidance of folks like that to target the goal of getting really the zoning code passed in Boise as good as it can be in a formal way.
Yeah, and I think that the catalyst really was that zoning code reform that Boise was proposing. The supporters of that reached out to us and said, would you guys get behind this? And then, as Patrick mentioned, we got some funding to do some branding and a website, and we got yard signs printed, and we got billboard space. So it was really that zoning code effort that kind of catalyzed the move to something that more formal. And I think that, you talk about, having an issue to kind of drive towards. That was, I think, the issue that we were driving towards was the zoning code rewrite, because although it wasn't perfect, it was certainly an improvement on where we were at that point. So, and we were, out front. I think we were the main organization that was kind of public in our support, and also trying to organize people around it to show up and testify on behalf of the zoning code rewrite. And my rough calculations on the testimony was about 2/3 of the testimony was positive for the zoning code rewrite, which was something I probably didn't expect on the outset going in. If you had told me 2 years before that there'd be a super majority of people who'd be in favor of this thing, I wouldn't have believed you. So I think that was kind of surprising, and also gave us more momentum. However, once it passed, it was sort of like, okay, we did it. Now what are we going to do?
For my part, I spent 1.5 years looking every week at every project that was being permitted in Boise, trying to do the math on my little spreadsheet of whether or not we were making an impact. And so even before Don Day's publishing his little articles about ADU growth, I knew what was up. We were getting more ADUs, but on a lot of the other aspects, not a lot was changing.
I love you, Patrick.
I guess, so it sounds like the initial idea for the zoning code rewrite, though, did that come more from Boise? I guess it's like chicken or the egg. Was it the folks knew this group existed and there was a lot of support for something like this, and so then there was kind of this more political motivation to change the code? Or was it their idea for... Do you know kind of where that came from?
They had an intent to rewrite their zoning code.
They did.
Separate and apart. And from, I don't know if you had started at Fort Boise then, because that was when Beater was still mayor.
Yeah, that was before.
That was before, but this was something that I think he intended to do, actually. And then when McLean was elected, she also intended to do this. So it was in some form of progress on its own. But how that looked, when that came, whether it passed, our support matters for that kind of thing.
And I think that the city leaders saw us as an opportunity to, get some support right out of the gate for it. Like, oh, there's a group out there that already likes this stuff. Let's talk to them and try to get them to kind of give it some momentum. I think that's sort of how that came about.
And something I've heard from other groups like this one across the country is one major goal is to kind of neutralize the opposition to, because I think there's potential opposition. There's the obvious opposition. There are people that are always going to say, we don't want apartments, we don't want duplexes, we don't want, the traffic and blah, 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 all this stuff that housing's going to create. But then you have, I think, a lot of other people kind of in the middle that maybe don't fully understand the housing problem, why housing costs are so high. They want to see it addressed, they just don't know how, and they don't, maybe just don't, a lot of people just don't think about this issue all day like us nerds do, so that's totally normal thing to not think about housing all day. But how did you guys kind of, fill that role of neutralizing the opposition and trying to, I think what you did very successfully, like you said, the outcome was 2/3 of the testimony was in favor of this pretty, expansive zoning code rewrite. So how did you do that as a group?
Well, and I'll also point out that the vote was 6-0 on council.
Unanimous.
And then the people who voted for it got reelected in the next cycle. So those were all sort of one thing after another. One thing that I thought of when you asked that question is we got smeared initially as being an AstroTurf organization for developers or out-of-state people or that somehow we weren't authentic. The organization wasn't authentic. And it was very easy for us at that point to say, this Facebook group has been here since 2018. I call myself a power company dad. I just work for the power company. I'm not a developer. I don't make any money from this stuff. We were just kind of normal people, and I think that Patrick and Alexandra were in the same boat, and we attracted other just sort of normal people and say, we live in Boise, this is us. So I think the nature of the group really helped blunt some of that criticism that they tried to throw at us.
I think there was a certain degree of incredulousness that anybody could be for this stuff among a certain group. Wait, you actually want the building to be taller? It just wouldn't process. And so there had to be, at least in their thinking, some type of ulterior motive or way there's a payday or something, because for many people that's beyond the scope of their normal thinking, that somebody would actually want this, even when it doesn't benefit them personally. And there's a small tangent I want to use this opportunity to take, which is one other dynamic in the testimony is, so not in my backyard. You're usually talking about a specific development, not in somebody's backyard, but near their backyard, and it has some connection to them. Whereas many people say, yes, I want there to be more housing because more places for either me to live or what have you. But when any specific project is happening, you don't know if you're going to be the person who's going to rent in that building when it comes up. So the benefits are diffuse when there's a specific project, but the costs or trade-offs are really concentrated. And so that makes it more challenging for us to have that positive emotional connection at the project-by-project level, which is why doing work at the level of the code has a better nexus between, for all the people who feel positively about housing, it's a place where we can make an impact.
I will add, I think, just having that visibility of somebody has a different opinion and there's actually like a person in front of you, whether that's for like other people in the community seeing that happen or the council members, like just having a voice that they can point to and say, okay, not everyone thinks that more housing is a bad idea. There are people in our community who also are pro-housing, because I think you get on the dais, it's like, that's your community that's in front of you, and if you're never responding to like what the voices of that community are saying in front of you, that's a really challenging place for them to be in. So just like being that voice for the so many people who maybe do want more housing and can't show up that evening or aren't against it and aren't going to take time out of their evening to come there. And I think one thing that we also did during the zoning code update that was important was showing up at the smaller community level meetings. We didn't just come when it was at the hearing in front of planning and zoning and then city council. We were in there in the community meetings in our own neighborhoods saying, yeah, I live in this neighborhood and I want actually even more than you're giving me with this update. I want more density. I want more height to like balance that conversation of the no.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. And that kind of brings me to another point where a lot of cities that review this stuff only provide limited opportunities for engagement. And I think one really cool thing that Boise did is that they did hold smaller community meetings and neighborhoods and going out to all kinds of events. I saw them everywhere talking about the modern zoning code and what it was meant to be. And I think that was another really great way to hear from a broader section of the community rather than just having it 4 p.m. on a Tuesday when no one else can go. Obviously, you guys were able to organize around that time, but what I've heard from a lot of communities across the state is that, the only opportunity to engage is at that 4 p.m. on a Tuesday, and the people that show up are always the same people, and they're always anti-housing. So I think for folks listening from cities or in elected positions, it's really important to find, if you are looking at policy change, finding diverse ways to engage the community through like polling or going to community events, talking to nonprofits that are affected by the problem of housing, things like that. So.
And cold emailing city staff and asking them to get coffee with you is surprisingly effective.
Yeah, we live in small cities like Idaho. Yeah, our elected officials are very accessible, and people don't realize that too. To just go, try to meet with your elected official no matter the position that you're in. It's really interesting. Folks don't realize that, if you have access to your elected officials here, and I was talking to a group of homeless advocates the other day, and talking with them about, hey, let's talk with these people about the root of the problem, which is housing, and a lot of them just were not, really politically engaged. I think that's true for a lot of Idahoans, but true for just people, generally we're working, we're busy, we're very focused on national level politics, typically. A lot of Idahoans don't vote, unfortunately, for various reasons, maybe disenchanted, disconnected, but I find that when people do try to get engaged locally, their hope springs. Like, it brings you an awareness that, hey, I actually can have an impact and there are things within my control. So I think it's cool that you guys provided an outlet for people in that way to get engaged locally and actually do something and have a tangible impact.
Yeah, it's kind of intoxicating when you have a success on that front. You're like, wow, that feels really good. We actually did that. Like, the things that we did resulted in some change. Maybe it wasn't as much change as we want, so we're going to keep going with it. But getting that zoning code rewrite passed and then having it, have so much support, and then the vote, and then that next election, man, that felt great.
Yeah.
And not to mention the lead NIMBY group surrendering.
Oh, really?
That was satisfying.
Yeah.
You got them they dissolved. Through this?
Yeah, I would call it a surrender. Yes.
Nice.
Yeah, we didn't hear from them after that.
No, they had a whole little announcement where they kind of said, well, we saw the election results, and the public didn't agree with our views after several key city council members were reelected, despite their providing a lot of push in the other direction, and then they dissolved, and that was that.
Wow, that's amazing. I love that you caused that to happen. So I guess
that was also intoxicating. Very true.
So what has the modern zoning code accomplished? We can kind of move a little bit, kind of next steps and thinking ahead. So, and kind of get into the weeds a little bit more on what you guys were going for, what you were hoping to see, what has happened, and where things have fallen short. You mentioned, ADUs in Boise have increased, the amount of applications has really increased, but I've heard from, especially smaller developers, there's still quite a few challenges to building more infill, smaller subdivisions, and smaller homes basically are still a big challenge. So I'd love for you to hear kind of what you think you did accomplish and where you think there's room for improvement still.
Yeah, I think we changed the baseline. Like, it was kind of I hate when people use this, but the mandate to build more housing. passing of the zoning code, re-election of all the city council members who were pro-housing. So it's very clear, I think, that the city's goal is housing. And so as we encounter challenges still that exist with the zoning code, we all know that the goal is to like correct those in favor of housing. So I think that there are still a lot of challenges, especially on the smaller lot, the smaller infill pieces. And, I think our city's doing a good job of looking at that and planning for implementation of how we can fix that. I think definitely on our mixed use areas that were kind of concentrated more on heavily trafficked roads, like those are all upzoned in a nice way that makes it easier to build housing. I think unfortunately the market did shift quite a bit, leading up to adoption of the modern zoning code. Housing prices were going crazy, and we did get a lot of housing downtown, especially. Now it's harder to build, and so we are going to just see a lull, and it's hard to communicate that, it's not just zoning, it is the market as well. But I hope that our zoning is better now that when the market comes back to build more housing, that we'll see that unlock more quickly.
Alexandra, in your view, are the mixed use zones, are we getting what you expect? And you kind of alluded to maybe because of market conditions, maybe not. And is there anything left on the city's end to make them better given market conditions, or is it just something we have to accept that the cost of building, whatever your zoning code is, it's only one piece of the puzzle. Talk a little bit more about the mixed zones and if there's anything left to be done there. I genuinely don't have an opinion on this.
Yeah, and I should know more too. I'm, I do work, professionally in development, and my focus really has been more downtown. So we are kind of shifting into like these more, close-in neighborhoods on State Street, on Vista. Where I live is on Vista, so I've been paying attention to that. I do think that seeing the housing that has been built more recently being affordable housing, like light tech funded housing, like Franklin and Orchard. I mean, that one started a long time ago, but that's like the type of housing I think that I see moving forward now, even in the current market, just because it has that alternative financing model. So, but like the form of that housing, I think is what we all envision seeing there, like a multi-story apartment building with some commercial on the ground floor that fills in next to existing neighborhoods, that adds amenities to that neighborhood and gives people the opportunity to live there, more people to live there as well. So it seems like it's pretty good. I think I've heard some frustration from the development community that we have like a minimum form now where it's like we want 4 stories, and some people are saying, well, we can only build 3 right now, can we work on that? And I do think that there's a way to do that, but I think personally removing parking minimums would be the next step that I would make to zoning.
Have you heard, sorry to jump in here, you've heard from developers in the mixed use zones that the parking minimums are still a binding constraint?
For affordable housing, I think it's more of a challenge, and I think there is enough variances that give you reduction in that, but I think I'm not hearing it so much from that level of developer, but the smaller infill developer that are seeing more challenges is that the parking minimums are hard.
That's where I'm hearing challenges and kind of where I'm seeing some opportunities for improvements, at least in the numbers, right? And what I've heard from smaller developers, which, yeah, multifamily I think is doing okay compared to the middle housing that we wanted to see and infill that we wanted to see, is what I've heard basically. But yeah, I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts too. I'm we're seeing more ADUs getting built. That's the big thing. We got some cool projects come to life through Franklin and Orchard. Wilson Station just came up those are both light tech properties. And then obviously people see apartments going up in downtown Boise all the time. So that's what a lot of folks talk about. But what about everything in between? I don't know that we've seen a big change there, and we'll love to hear your guys' thoughts on that, maybe why that's not happening, or maybe you think it is happening more than I do.
Yeah.
Unless you have thoughts on it.
Yeah, you go.
Do you have thoughts on the middle housing piece?
I do. The one thing I do think that I see more of is more townhomes. Mm-hmm. So that's good. I think having the smaller lot size and just more flexibility on where you can build those. it's a for sale product that I think is possible right now in the market, and fee simple, which is just like a different, versus condominium, there's a more complicated ownership model. So that's another like challenging piece of a lot of people like, why don't we have more home ownership opportunities? And like there's a lot of things with condominiums that are challenging that I won't get into right now. But so
insurance, I heard.
having more townhomes though has been a really positive thing that I think I've seen happening.
Okay, cool.
I think that one of the challenges, since it passed a couple years ago, is people say, well, okay, this passed, why hasn't housing gone down? Why haven't the prices come down since it passed? And I think there's a couple answers to that. One is it takes time for the projects to cycle through and for the approvals and also just for the mindset to change for people who are building those houses. Like, oh, this is possible now, we can do this. I think that Alexandra talked about like the construction cost issue, like that's a real issue that this doesn't address. But you also can't run the opposite scenario. Like we don't know what prices would be if it hadn't passed. You know, they could be higher. So even though they haven't come down, maybe the zoning code rewrite has blunted some of the increases. So I think that is a challenge. To your question about some of the middle stuff, there's a really neat project, I think, across from Camelsback Park, which is a coffee shop on the bottom, and then I think it's apartments above that coffee shop. And one of the things I think that will help do is show people what's possible. Something like that hasn't been built for a really long time, I think. And so when people see that it's new and it's here, that might give them an idea for, well, we should do that over here, or we could do that over there. So I think that it's a little bit of a snowball effect, and I think we're going to get some momentum coming, especially as Alexandra talked about, when some of the other obstacles are out of the way. So my quick answer to folks is have some patience. Let's see where things go. I think this is a cultural shift as much as it is a legal shift.
For sure. Yeah, it only passed in 2023. These projects take a couple years to come up, so I agree with you. We'll probably keep seeing more impacts of this as time goes on.
I'm a little bit less patient than Joe. So I love that project that's hopefully going to be under construction soon near Camelsback Park with the coffee shop and the 4 units above. I think that's terrific. But for me, the fact that that's the one project each of us think of when we're thinking of the modern zoning code, it's like literally one building of interest here. That's a sign that we're not getting the kind of impact that I want to see. I'm just more ambitious than that in the medium term, I suppose. We're not seeing that many of them. There probably is more than one, but that's the one we all think of. And when I look at the code and I think about the debates as we looked at those triplexes, quadplexes, and similar mid-sized stuff, that's where a lot of the discussion between the various forces and groups focused on. And the city did a lot of things to make it more possible, but also a lot of things to address some of the concerns on the other side. And it's really complicated. We have open space requirements at the per unit level, not the per building level. There's extensive landscaping stuff and streetscaping that apparently, I've been told, can be somewhat binding on the project. There's a variety of details that, when stacked together, make it hard to make these projects feasible or pencil, even with the incentive structures as currently offered. And I think when you look around at the permitting, a little bit over 2 years out here, I want to ask the city and ask other people that are engaged in the topic, are we seeing too many or too few of these? And if the answer is too few, then we should kind of reassess some of those details to make them a little bit more feasible. So we have more than the one brilliant project by Camelsback Park.
So a few things on that. First of all, I think the ADUs have been a pretty good success story, and you don't see a lot of ADUs because they're in the backyard.
Yeah.
So they're not as visible.
That's a big success story for sure.
Yeah, I think so. And then the other thing, I think that there is a lesson there for other cities that might be going through this, which is, Patrick's right, the city did water down some of the improvements in order to make it more palatable to the NIMBY crowd. And I would say that did not work. Like, they didn't get their support. It's not like the NIMBYs said, oh, okay, well, since you have these open space requirements, we're now in favor of this. No, they just found something else to be against on it. So it didn't actually get their support, and it watered down the final product. So I think that the lesson there is, don't listen to them. Just go for it and do what you know will work.
I love it. And I love the hot take from the corner there. That's awesome, too. But yeah, don't water it down. And I think, moving forward, I know Boise's going to be making changes to their zoning code every year. So Neighbors for Boise is still going to be involved in kind of pushing some improvements forward each year. And so do you guys want to talk a little bit about specifics for what we're Neighbors for Boise is hoping to see kind of in 2025? Just a few of the specific asks that we have or things that you want to see improved. It's great. That's an opportunity, and it's great that they're doing that. They're not just saying like, okay, we passed our zoning code in 1972, which is the original one, and we're just gonna not touch that really for 50 years. It's great that they're seeing this as a living, breathing document and continuing conversation with the community, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, well, I set up my top one already, personally, parking.
Parking.
I do think that Patrick has a really good point. Like, the code can get really complicated on all these, like, little pieces, and especially if you're a new or smaller developer, like we're seeing, like, doing more of, like, the innovative, like really cool project type of things that we want to see infill within neighborhoods, like deeper within neighborhoods. Like, you're only gonna come up to like so many challenges that like stop you from doing what you want to do before you say it's not worth it. And so if you are running into all these like little things that nitpick at your project of like open space and parking and like access and then all these other pieces that are not really like visible when you first open the code, it's like only once you start like maybe drawing out your project and then you're like, oh wait, now I have to like take away this piece or that piece. Like we saw that happen pre-modern zoning code. There was a little project that was near the apartment that I was living in at the time. Somebody wanted to build like 3 units in an existing building, and they just hit so many different challenges that they were finally like, I'm not doing it, it's 1 unit now. And so we do really need like the city also to like tell us what are those things, because we can talk to people, but like they need to also be identifying what were the challenges that killed projects or that like made them not go forward, and how can we like, if they were projects that we actually did want to see, how can we change that condition? So that'd be a place that I would look at.
Big thing is like make housing development simple.
Yes.
It's kind of what I hear. Like cut the red tape, cut the regulation as much as you can, make it simple so folks can build and not have to come up after obstacle. And there are still obstacles in the modern zoning code, and there probably always will be. And so just kind of continue to remove what we can in a way that makes sense, obviously. But yeah.
And when we get to specific numbers, like exact setback quantity, number of feet, or number of feet of open space, or whatever, I would really hope the city staff could do some external validation and look at another city that has the type of product we're talking about with a given piece of the code, and see if it's getting built there with a given set of dimensional standards. Like look at Spokane, that I know also modernized their zoning code, and they did many details different than us, and they're seeing different results in different submarkets than we're seeing. So the kind of that qualitative comparative analysis, and say, yeah, I think the numbers that we're putting here are likely to lead to the outcomes that we're wanting to see, and to have that confidence as they make these edits, I think is really important to keep in mind.
Yeah, totally. I believe they will do some of that. So we have like 1 or 2 more minutes. So I just want to, thank you guys for talking with me about this. I'm excited for the next steps and what we're going to, see moving forward. And thank you for you all for the work that you did to organize our city around this stuff and neutralizing, or I guess it sounds like you've surrendered the opposition. But I guess for parting words, do you have anything you could say to folks who might be listening from other cities in kind some words of encouragement, things that they could do to kind of get something like this started, and continuing, in their cities across Idaho. Yeah, I'll be digging into details too on some of the more of the zoning stuff with Byron Falwell here coming up too on the podcast. So that'll be good. I'll get his take as well. I know he was very involved in this, but we'll talk more and more about the zoning. But want to hear, just parting words on how communities can organize around this stuff. We need more neighbors for Boise's and other cities in Idaho.
It's shockingly easy to reiterate a point from earlier, just to email your city leadership in smaller cities and to meet them and to show your interest. It's likely they may even have somebody of like, I met one other person like you a couple weeks ago that was also interested in the stuff. You should probably call them and make those connections that way. So find at least a handful, 3, 4, 5, 7 like-minded people through some means. It's a little bit on you to figure out how that works together, and then get to know some of your people in your city administration or leadership on these issues. I think they'll want to hear from you, and you'll be surprised at the breadth of those conversations. And after you make some friends, have those initial chats, you'll know where to go from there.
Yeah, I would say it's okay to start small. Like, there were several years where we were really just like chatting amongst ourselves. There was some like walking or biking tours that we would do that like educated people about like you can't actually build this anymore. Like, this is the type of housing that we're talking about that we want to see more of. And then also just showing up to like individual project hearings, and that maybe didn't necessarily change things on a broader scale, but like it made a small impact, and it gave us confidence, I think, that our voices did matter. And then built also people seeing that, built up the group that we actually ended up coming to the modern zoning code with. And then I think one thing I did want to circle back on is like, even if people can't make it to hearings, a lot of places will have the opportunity to provide comment like via email. But it's hard to figure out how to do that when they're due and like track all the things. So if you have somebody who's like Patrick who loves spreadsheets and tracking stuff, like engage them on that, and they can share easy action steps for people that can't spend as much time getting in the details, but just like getting people an opportunity to engage in some small way.
Yeah, I think my main piece of advice is to find yourself to Patrick. Just find someone who's willing to do that kind of stuff and feed him. But one piece of advice I would give is to not be discouraged. I think that we are pushing against decades and decades of a cultural mindset, and the counter to that has to start somewhere, and it's not going to be quick or easy, and you might take some losses, and just keep going, because I think that it's not going to happen overnight, because it's been since the 70s that the Boise zoning code was enacted, and so it's just going to take some work and some time, but I think that we've proven, and other groups like us have proven, that you can be successful, so just stay at it.
I love it. Words of encouragement for all of you all over Idaho, so we can get more housing built and no longer be, hopefully, the second least affordable market in the United States, right? We got to keep building more housing, especially housing that Idahoans can attain, and starter homes, infill, middle housing, and we hope that everyone in Idaho agrees with this. Everyone who agrees with this will kind of put this words of advice to action after listening today. Thank you guys for being part of Gem State Housing Alliance's first podcast, and for all that you do and continue to do to improve zoning in Boise.